Management from the Business School at City University in London, formerly called CAS.
Hi everyone, I'm Sylvia Malo. I'm a program manager at the Business School.
And the three of us have been collaborating for a while in general, and very specifically in relation to what we'll be talking about today. I first of all just want to start with an acknowledgement. Two of my grandchildren were born and live in Ballarat, Victoria, where the Wadawurrung people have lived for, I'm told, 25,000 years. So I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So that's my Australian connection, a close one. And this is our schedule for today. We were originally thinking of half an hour in the breakouts, but we've decided we want more time. In particular, we need a bit more time for the briefing. And at the bottom, we want more time for your own discussion. I mean, you'll be in the breakout rooms for possibly a little less than 20 minutes, depending on how we see progress going. But obviously the discussion is very important. And even though we're tight on time, I would say if anybody's got a burning question with the numbers we have now, we're quite happy for you just to unmute yourself and speak directly to us. We're not, you know, sitting on some pedestal here. We don't mind being interrupted as we go along. So feel free, especially if anything, for example, is not clear, to interrupt us. Martin, do you want to kick off with this?
I'm going to talk a bit. We're going to base this around a particular activity, which the three of us were involved in, and it was part of the induction week, part of the welcome week for business management undergraduate students, starting in the autumn, starting in September of 2020, and the context is partly that this is something we've been interested in doing for quite a long time. So, for example, there was a meeting way back in January in a quaint past time when we were able to sit in meeting rooms and talk to each other. And we were talking about what we're doing, and Sylvia, in fact, said, well, so we need to use the principles of teaching in the first week, because historically the welcome week has been about practicalities and things like that. And we were interested in doing this online and possibly using Microsoft Teams. And we're interested in doing it online because typically in a typical welcome week, even though we're a city centre university, a lot of people haven't actually arrived at the university at the time they were doing this. Now, as you'll have noticed, in September 2020, pretty much none of the people joining us had arrived. So not only were we interested in doing something a little bit innovative, but we're interested in doing it in the middle of a pandemic when we were all trying to organize things at short notice and when we didn't know how many students we were going to have. We weren't sure whether we were going to have 600 students or 250 students because people might not do things. We ended up with a number much closer to 600. So it's the opening week. It's not compulsory. It's not assessed. It doesn't have academic credit. And that means actually something which is quite liberating is that we can plan something without going through the conventional university quality control procedures. We based it around each day would be structured that there would be a briefing at 8 in the morning London time, and then people would work in teams, and during the afternoon, not too late, because we had a lot of students in Asia for whom our afternoon in London was their late evening. So in the afternoon, the students would take away some challenge, and the afternoon, the students would share that with us and do it all online. And the idea was to get students used to the idea of learning in an immersive and active way. The idea was a little bit influenced by this notion of threshold concepts. We need to bring students away from the high school way of learning. And we also had the idea that each day would have a theme. So two particular things which happened with day 3. The first was that we wanted to do something about responsible management, and 5 days before delivery, after wondering about it, we came up with an idea about the Sustainable Development Goals. The other thing, which happened slightly more than 5 days before delivery, but not much, was that I secured the services of our dean to go and give a talk at the centre of that day. So we linked the whole idea of the Sustainable Development Goals, which we're going to talk about in a moment, to responsible management, to the dean talking about what a business school should look like. Clive.
This is the, on the 5th day, Friday, the students were asked to reflect on and summarize the week. And this was Group B10's summary of the week. And it's very interesting to see the way that they represented that. So we're talking today about day 3, which is the Sustainable Development Goals activity, which we'll be asking you to do a fragment of in your group work. And you can see that there's a sort of tempo to this. It's really interesting. The students saw it as a climax. We didn't know that day 3 was going to be the climax of the week. Otherwise, we wouldn't have made it day 3. But for them, that was the big moment of the week. And that's really why we put this up to share, because there was such a fantastic feedback from the students. And, you know, despite the fact this is something that we'd only really had 5 days to work on developing. And the timetable of the any given day was presented to the students like this, and you can see that we're using email, we're using Teams. The dean gave his presentation at 2 o'clock using Zoom, and so they had to cope with quite diverse activities and a deliberate mix of individual stream. So a stream was a stream of 250 students in a plenary, which Martin and I did 1 plenary each. And then they were in the groups, which were about 20 in size. And the way we presented it to them was this. Every day they got a grid like this, showing them the exact technology that was being used, the exact type of work they would be doing. And we used this red thread concept to show how what challenge that they got at 8 o'clock by email was then worked on, it was exemplified in the plenary, worked on in group, and in fact they had to hand it in by 2 o'clock, and we then had the final plenary at 3 o'clock. So this took us quite a while to work out this method of representing. Students demand huge clarity in a context of uncertainty. And this, I think it's fair to say, Martin and Sylvia, this worked quite well. This sort of grid and colored approach gave them a better idea than what we started with, which was that. That's much more difficult for them to follow. And the first thing that they got was the email. And I showed this to a colleague yesterday, and they said, we can't see that. We can't see what's on this slide. I said, that's the whole point of this slide. We don't want you to see what's on the slide. They got it each morning, 8 o'clock, a quite substantial document, briefing document. And we have your email addresses, and we will be emailing you afterwards the full email and effectively a draft article with all the logic and explanation of what we're doing. So don't worry, you will get a copy of this email. But for now, the main thing is the students in Asia could start work at 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. So this is where the globe works quite well. Over to you, Sylvia.
Thanks, Clive. So we just wanted to take a minute to kind of give a context to what was day 3 essentially for our students. It was all about the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, and link it to our role as a Prime member and formerly a Prime champion actually at the business school. So the Sustainable Development Goals are the 17 goals obviously designed by the UN as really that blueprint to achieve a better future for all. And these two areas we have brought really forward in the business school because it's something that is really important, we believe, for our students to really understand what's going to happen in the future and be an active part in that future. And it's important for them to see that it's actually an integral area, not just something that's off to the side, a module that it may take at some point later in their business careers at the school or afterwards. So therefore, it was a really wonderful opportunity in this Welcome Week to kind of highlight what that meant for them as a full day activity. If we can go to the next slide. Just wanted to share kind of, if you happen to not be as familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, we wanted to show you the 17 goals. Many of our students actually weren't familiar with those goals, which is why it was really great for them to get in touch with them as a team. And by including it as an entire induction day activity, it was really an opportunity for them to create something collaboratively and understand the role of sustainability and responsible management at the very start of their business school experience. So that's why we hope to kind of model that for you today to experience that for yourselves. Back to you, Clive.
Actually, this is me. So I think
Martin.
This is pretty much the activity which we did. This is a brief again to give you. And to give you context, can't place this too strongly. This was basically, we put this together, the details for the students in 5 days. In 5 days when we had other day jobs, getting ready for the main part of the start of term and trying to even figure out who was on the course. So the UN...
Martin, can I just suggest people screen capture this? We are going to try and put it into the chat, but if you were to screen capture this, you'd have it available.
So
sorry to interrupt, Martin.
UN, and the scenario we gave was this was something which we've been asked by an alumna of the business school to do, is to develop a game-based approach, and we'll talk about the definition of game, but a game-based approach which would promote an interest in sustainable development goals among a group of first-year undergraduates. It would have to be based around the 17 goals. And what I'm saying is that in your breakout rooms, you've got 20 minutes or so to look at that. You won't have enough people to have different people in all these roles, but a very explicit part of our aim with this was to get the students to do what I call active teamwork and to think about what each of them was contributing. So if somebody was keeping track of the time, they would be part of that. If somebody was doing the creative stuff coming to design, they would be part of that. If somebody was acting as a chair or a coordinator, they would acknowledge that. Come up with an idea of a game or a simulation. It could be a board game, could be a war game, or like a TV quiz, or even a soap opera with very, very broad definition of what a game is. Think about some underlying, a lot of these sustainable development goals come down to some form of conflict. Think about some underlying form of conflict and what causes that and what would encourage the sustainable development goals and what would detract from them. And be prepared at the end of it to do 1 minute, doesn't need to be great complicated graphics, though obviously the students have more time to do this, 1 minute just to come up with what sort of ideas you produced. So this, just to give you one example, this is not, I thought this was probably the one which had the most immediate visual impact. There were others who were very, very imaginative and came up with some interesting things, but if only because the Monopoly board is such instantly recognizable shape and such an instantly recognizable base to use it on. And having said it was just a Monopoly board, there are things in there like 350.org, which I didn't know that much about. The things in there which I looked, Infraco, Africa, I was prompted to go off and find out a little bit more about that. So this is Ecopoly. It was produced by one particular group of students, and you'll see this.
Now, in case you're panicking, the students had 140 minutes to produce this. You've only got 20 minutes. So we're not expecting you to do quite this standard. And of course, they had teams of, around 20. So we've got teams of 3 or 4. But it does show, even in that time, the quality of student work that was possible. And later on, Sylvia will show you a few more examples of what the students managed to do, working totally remotely in 140 minutes.
And these were people who've been thrown together typically with no prior experience. They were learning to use the technology. We were learning to use the technology as well. They had their share of technical problems. There was one moment that I was not on that day. One moment I was talking and my mute button decided to stop working completely, and we managed. Anyway, Sylvia, you're going to.
So we thought we could give you some guidance on kind of what we hope to see today, where we kind of gave it gold would be something that's quite novel and imaginative, just different and creative. Silver definitely is something that's very interesting. And let's all be careful of, the borderline and the obvious. And of course, we don't want to fail. So hopefully you enjoy the activity as the students had. As Martin and Clive had said, they thought it was quite a highlight of the week because it is very much about your imagination and kind of pushing your thoughts in how you create something quite different. So yeah, we thought I'd give you some time.
Now we're going to allocate you to groups, and just whilst we're doing that allocation, has anybody got any questions before you start in your group of 3 or 4? We're very happy to take any immediate questions. We'll obviously be coming around the groups as well.
So you did this at the beginning of 2020 or beginning of your academic year? So
September is the first week of their academic.
Right.
It's week 0, with the following week being the first week of teaching.
First week. So are you going to, or have you been able to follow up, say 3 months after, to see what the impact of it was?
Martin will be talking about that a little at the end. Okay.
Yes.
Are we ready with the breakout rooms?
I believe so.
Okay.
If I click create, I'm not sure what happens, but I will.
Well,
I will
Push the button and we'll see.
Okay. Great. So there will be 4 rooms, but Clive and Martin, we shouldn't be in them. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
They can just
Brandon.
reject the invitation.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So room 1 will have 4, room 2 will have 3, and room 3 will have 3. And Clive and Martin, you're going to be sent to room 4, but you can come back, I think. I don't know how to take you out. So I'm going to open all the rooms now, and hopefully it should be a lot faster than Teams, if I remember correctly.
Sylvia, can I just jump in with a quick question?
Yes.
So is your expectation or the facilitator's expectation that we have something visual to show at the end, or is it just if there's a concept that's also okay?
I would say, yeah, oral is fine in these circumstances.
Okay.
If someone's inclined to drawing, that's definitely happy to be shared as well.
If it's gold and oral, that's great. But if it's boring and oral, then it isn't.
Okay. Oh, actually, room 1 and 2 will have 4, and then room 3 will have 3. Hopefully
okay. Thank you, Sylvia.
Okay, I'm opening all the rooms. Hopefully you should be able to join them. And see you in about 20 minutes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Clive, are you back?
It's here.
Yep. I'm going to suggest that we take it in the order that the groups finished. So that'll be 3, 2, 1. We start with group 3.
Hi, everybody. So I worked with Shakira and also Anita, and so I'm speaking on behalf of the 3 of us, and they might dive in at any time. So we started by defining our student because we knew that the activity or game would be dependent upon the students that we were working with. So our students are postgraduate, distance, mainly internationals with limited university experience and lots of what we'd call post-work or post-experience, so work experience. And we had a lot of conversation, and our outcome is Global Humans, an app which is location-based, to think global and get local, to give you options to meet sustainability goals. This gives each person the opportunity to actually look at each of the goals, and by actually researching, they will get a badge that gives them a bronze badge. By actually finding an institution, that will give them a silver badge. And then when they engage with an activity, it reaches them to a gold badge. By taking each of the sustainable development goals, we said you could group them and also show how they link. So for example, you might be creating better education, but it might also lead to reducing waste and global footprint, or you might be reducing hunger and at the same time reducing waste. So there's sort of some links in there. Basically what happens is that once you have the app, it allows you to, it'll prompt you. So we sort of said, think about it like a Fitbit type thing. So it'll prompt you and say, did you, today, how did you get to work today? And if anywhere in the world, so you say, yep, I scanned, here's my plastic water bottle, scan, scan, scan. And then it says to you, did you know that that's this amount of waste? For you could have one of these. It might even reward you by sending you one of these and saying, this would change your global footprint. Did you know that you're walking past this institution, you could donate your clothes, or you could give children an opportunity by buying them a book, and the other thing that we said was really important was we were trying to have some graduate outcomes on this, so that this gave the students the opportunity to understand these organisations, to think how they could act local, but also think about, was it an institution that they could engage with to assist them and therefore build their skills for down the path, applying what they're learning at university. So maybe this becomes something that they use as a report for applied information, or actually assisting in some way. And that also builds their resume, without being too commercial, it builds their resume skills and shows them how this is good business is good for the world, right? It's not the other way.
I'm going to have to cut you off there, Lynn. I think,
okay.
You seem to have pretty much done it. I'm not going to comment on it now because I'd prefer to comment on.
We just want to say you could ethically grab the data at the background and show them how they were comparing to others, and make them a little bit badged and competitive for it as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Lynn. Group number 2. I think who's group
Is
number
that
2? Yes, Bronte. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I'll just quickly bring up our screen, but I'm going to ask Heather to perhaps chat to what we were talking about. Heather, are you happy to chat? Sorry,
oh, Heather, I think you might be muted.
Muted. There we go.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus, Bronte.
That's okay.
Well, we brainstormed quite a few ideas, and it was a really interesting brainstorm too. And anyway, we came up with hit me with your best goal. So it's basically a debate, all right? So you have students break into groups, 6 groups of 6, where there'll be 3 people on each side, and they select 1 to 3 SDGs. They go off and they research it. The goal is to come back and debate that SDG, or those 2 or 3 SDGs. So 3 of the students will be pro that SDG and 3 of the students will be con. Okay, then they come back and then they present for about 10 minutes each. Oh, we've got 5 minutes. Yeah, they formulate their arguments. They come back and they debate for 5 minutes each on each side. Then they have probably about 5-10 minutes rebuttal. And then the rest of the students in the group actually poll on that. So they use the polling platform to actually vote. So it's the students voting for which one they're voting for, whether that's the pro that SDG or it's con that SDG. And we also thought that then that can also go into a debrief or even if it was taken to an assessment where it could be sort of a reflection of how and why the pros and cons of those SDGs. So that's about it. Did you want to add anything, Bronte?
Beautiful, Heather. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Group 2. And back to last but not least, Group number 1.
Okay, that was Christy Goodnight, Janice Wardrop, Sarah Wright, and me. We agreed that our focus was how to overcome the contextual elements of what we variously described as human drives in day-to-day, the short and long term, the impact of short decisions on long-term outputs. We had a really quick trip through what the SDGs are. And I'm just going through my notes. We looked at the interconnectedness. They are all in some way connected. It's very hard to take them apart and only look at one. But also what's interconnected was the issue of my decisions versus world impact. So we came up with a game called Doctor Who and the SDGs. It's a combination of that would probably design as an app. It's a card game based on a question game called Would You Rather? Would you rather swim in a dirty sea or find dead turtles on the seashore? The cards would then be individual choices. Each card would have end, and the end would then, you'd put it into, metaphorically, put it into Doctor Who's TARDIS, and the TARDIS would go word click, and out would come a world scale outcome of your decision. So the idea is we're looking at, here's my personal decision, what happens when that's multiplied by 1 million? So the key focuses then would be to help reveal to first year students how their individual choices have short and long-term impacts, the scale of small decisions when we blow them up large. And we also looked at how to modify it to include teams, because teams have an impact on individual choices. So right back at the beginning, they could be given a set of cards that only have to choose one, or that have to agree in some way, and then put it into the TARDIS and then see the world outcome. And of course, the world outcomes would be based on the trends in the SDGs. What we saw as outcomes was that it would be class discussion on the nature of scale, so that the students see, I'm just using a throwaway cup, but so's everybody else. So, well, look at what happens when 1 million of us throw them away. So it's class discussion, individual awareness of personal behaviours, and then I guess the final thing would be a larger discussion on the interconnections among the various SDGs. So Doctor Who and the SDGs.
Well, I'm going to avoid irritating the three groups by giving marks. What's interesting is, I think, Martin and Sylvia, how the groups here mirrored the student groups. The first point is the diversity. There was a staggering diversity of the 22 student groups. Hardly any duplication whatsoever, and there's clearly no duplication here. We've got 3 very different formats. And the other thing we were emphasizing was imagination. Many of these students wanted to be imaginative. They hadn't come to this week or come to our business school thinking they would be pushed on the imagination side. And it was interesting going around all 3 groups to see you struggling and then overcoming blockages to imagination, which is shown up in the results. So I'm not going to give marks because all 3 were good in different ways. And we'll move on now. Sylvia is just going to show some of the student work, and then Martin will finish up with a couple of discussion slides, and we'll have a little bit of time for some final questions.
Clive, can you share your screen, or did you want me to?
I can share my screen.
Okay. So as Clive said, what you'll see is just a sample of some of our student work. So like we said in the beginning, they had much more time than you guys did. So kudos to kind of the energy and the effort you brought forward, and clearly all the imagination and creativity. But we wanted to kind of demonstrate, as you have as well, the breadth and kind of diversity of their thinking, which I think is what really was the highlight of this experience, because they also presented to their peers. So there was a lot of actual exchange that we'll show you afterwards about people commenting on what was produced and the different products that were created. So we just have three, you can go to the next slide, Clive. But I think some things that I would highlight are just the designs are different, the approaches are different, and what they chose to focus on, right? Just as you have shown in these three groups, whether it's demonstrating your individual impact in a global arena, or if it's kind of creation of negotiation or demonstration of how things go along with each other or don't go along with each other. It was really incredible to see the vast imagination really that they brought forward in that one day. And just further design, just really highly complex, actually sometimes not so complex, but still really innovative. So thanks for sharing your ideas. And as Clive said, these will be shared with you after as well, if you wanted to look into the details.
I think we should just mention that it was Sylvia's idea to use the SDGs, which is at the root of this. So we're very appreciative of her originality. This was unexpected. The students giving very clear feedback to each other, unprompted. We didn't ask for this. But the groups were, I think, Martin, we were very surprised, having dealt with obviously the same students in previous years in term one, to see just how supportive in this very difficult time they were of each other. So these are people commenting on each other group's work. Very, very exciting from a sort of emotional point of view, almost, for us to see that happening.
I'll jump in there.
Yep.
Can I jump in there? Because
you want to take over now, Martin? You drive you tell me when you want to move on.
Okay, so actually to answer Elizabeth's question as well from it earlier, is the feedback we got from the students, very positive, but interestingly, partly prompted by a conversation that Clive and I had. We asked about what it meant for students who didn't take part in it. And one particular student who said she hadn't been able to come along to the Welcome Week because she had working commitments, immediately said that she'd picked up a huge amount from talking to her peers and people who had taken part, and people who had people who had taken part in it. Let's quickly show the next slide, and then I'm going to talk to the last two. So this is actually another piece of student work, and this is their one of the team's final reflections, where they map out what they did day after day after day. And again, they picked up their UN board game. They did some work to do with maps, to do with doing in fact a virtual trip around London, which is something that they're going to be doing again fairly shortly. Just got a couple more slides which cover overall big picture learnings. So most important one, I think, is actually that the business management students, they loved the Sustainable Development Goals. They really bought into the importance of that as part of the management studies. And without exception, they really enjoyed the challenge of devising a game. It's something they saw, it was the right degree of work, it was enough creativity, it was difficult but worthwhile to resource the whole process of designing, bringing this together. We got students involved. The students felt a measure of involvement in what they were doing right from the start. And they felt, once we got past that initial 8 in the morning email of saying what you're doing, they actually understood why we were doing this and why this was very different from what they were doing at high school. We were able to handle working with students in a whole range of different circumstances. In the end, we did everything online in the Welcome Week. I talked about the idea of going in for half a day, if that. In fact, it turned out that I would have had to fill in a risk assessment, and they only just opened up the process for us to go in the final stage of planning. So that was, as it turned out, what in normal times would have been straightforward, just go in and see a bunch of students in the university. That was the one which was too difficult to plan, and partly because the university bureaucracy, partly a couple of other reasons. Communication with the participants was, again, it was hard work, but really worthwhile.
Can I move you on, Martin, because we're virtually at the cusp?
Okay, two very specific things. One is the open textbook, and the other is this whole idea of unknown unknowns. And the big one is that we were able to, we'd wanted this for a while, we did it. We were able to get a welcome week, which was academic, it involved people, it got them to take part in real business management concepts. And that's it.
Okay, so give us a couple of minutes for any final questions from yourselves. If you just want to unmute and ask us questions. Obviously, we're available online afterwards, but we're very happy to take questions or challenges even now.
Yeah, I guess your very last line, students who couldn't attend or chose not to attend. Do you think this obviously engaging experience will have a difference over time? That they'll feel left out, or that effect will fade, or trust me to go for the other side of the coin?
For students, I think the important, and this is a little bit like the Lavie and Wenger legitimate participation. I think there's a group of there's a group of students who don't attend but still get the benefit of being on the edge of it. And I think
right.
I wouldn't want to get too hung up about the numbers who attend. Even if we get 40% of students coming along to that, the benefit. What we didn't manage to do, I'd hoped we'd be a bit better at avoiding there being a tail of stragglers of students who still have trouble partway through the term of getting involved. I'm not convinced that we did as much as I'd like to have done to avoid that, but we had very particular, that's something which is difficult in a pandemic. I've just been dealing today with a student who hasn't had access to his university email for the last 3 months, as understandable.
Oh God.
And has just been saying, why didn't you tell me I had to do this? I said, well, you know you had to. So yeah.
If I may add as well, sorry, Clive, just very quickly. I think by kind of setting this standard very, very early, you kind of exemplify what we hope for their participation and engagement. And I think that was really important in the context, obviously, of everything being online. And save, obviously, there were technology problems the world around. But if we can kind of at least set that inspiration at the beginning, I think that goes a long way, even if they weren't able to attend straight away at first.
I think the two
it'll help.
One is that we have to try and model good practice and work effectively as a team, which I'd like to feel we do. And one is that teamwork and some sort of certain amount of small group teaching is part of their studies for the next 2.5 years. We don't want, I would actually say, if you want to go and spend all your time sitting in a 300-seat lecture theatre or the electronic equivalent thereof, find some other degree, don't do ours. I wouldn't put it in quite such blunt terms on a open day.
Maybe you would. Yeah.
But that is the message I'll try and send.
Thanks, guys. That was absolutely fabulous.
Okay, well, you were all very good as well. We were delighted with your responses, and we'll be emailing you automatically the long document that we've got explaining how to do it if you want to do it yourselves, and if you improve it, certainly let us know, because we thanks really to Sylvia's work, not just at that time, but she'd been working with our students, in depth on the Sustainable Development Goals for over a period of time, and that showed in the way that she was able to contribute massively to this activity. So good luck for the rest of the day. For us, it's coming up toward nearer the mid. We're only not far off midnight now, so
Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Thanks so
joining.
much, guys.
Nice
That
to
was
meet you
great.
all.
bye.